Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Tarot. An exciting episode for you today because we finally jump into the Major Arcana with our first card, the Magician. We're going to be looking at the meaning of the card along with its number, its name and its image. Especially we're going to be looking at the hidden symbols inside the cards to kind of glean some meaning. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, go grab your deck, get a cup of tea and get yourself ready as we talk about the Magician. Hello and welcome back. So we are going to be looking at one of the Major Arcana today, the Magician. The Magician is one of 22 Major Arcana cards. So if you imagine that Major Arcana stretch through the whole of human experience in 22 cards, we're looking at 1/22nd, a fraction of that huge amount of human experience. So because of that, these cards are really dense. There's an awful lot to talk about. I normally talk about this card in about 2 hours and I'm trying to do it in about 20-30 minutes. So at times I might be talking too fast and sometimes I might kind of say things flippantly that you want more information about. Jump in the comments below and talk to me. I will try and reply as soon as possible. These are highly detailed cards and these are sometimes a bit complex and hard to get. But hopefully by kind of not spending 5 seconds and saying this card means this, it'll sink deeper into subconscious and you'll feel like you know this card rather than just think that card means this. Good. That said, if you have seen these videos before, I've mentioned that I'm going to be using 2 different tarot cards to illustrate every single video. They are from these decks. This is the Tarot de Marseille style cards, and this version is Le Veritable Tarot de Marseille by Chris Haddar, a French-Canadian guy, and he's represented this on the 1760 Conver deck, so it's a historical deck. This one, however, is based on, it is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, or the Pamela Colman-Smith deck, or the A.E. Waite deck, but this one is based on Golden Dawn principles in the late 19th century, and this was published in around about 1910, and these principles are originally from these, but they've been modified and inverted commas corrected into Golden Dawn thought. So this is a lot more ceremonial. So those are the 2 decks that I'm going to be using to represent. I talk about them more thoroughly in other videos, and so I'm just going to try and gloss over that now. So the Magician is the first tarot card in the Trump sequence. I'm going to be looking at the number, the name, and then we're going to be looking at the imagery. So let's start with the Marseille card. So the Marseille card here, the number is obviously 1. 1 is seen as a number that's indivisible in kind of esoteric philosophy and theology. It's seen as something that is a whole. You can't get a whole lower than 1. Yes, you can get fractions. Yes, you can get imaginary numbers. Yes, you can get negative numbers. Ignoring all of that, historically it was seen as a pure number. It was seen as a perfect number. Sometimes the number 1 is applied to God, the prime move, the first mover, the creator. And it's seen as the number where everything else comes on. You can get all the other numbers by adding 1 to itself. So because of that, everything came out of 1. So in a way, this is a creator. This is a beginner card. It is about things beginning. It's about, in some ways, about the divine, and in some ways, divinity, and in some ways, being a whole and being complete. That said, in the Marseille, you see that we've got a Roman numeral as I. You'll also see it here. It looks more striking on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, if you think. The I could stand for I. I as in the referring to oneself, the ego. So the ego is Latin for I am, ego. This is the I. So the I could represent the sense of self, the sense of the self knowing thyself, the self reflecting on the self, kind of loosely quoting Kierkegaard there. It can mean the sense of self, or the way that one sees oneself, or the personality being how one projects the self to others. So this card could represent something to do with the sense of self, or the ego, or the way that we present ourselves to someone else. Good. So that's the number. You could just read the number of this card and get away with it as being a good meaning. However, we also have the title. As I said, there's 3 parts of the card. There is the number, the title, and the image. You could theoretically just read only numbers. You could technically read only titles, or just imagery. I tend to do a mixture of all and have a look at them all and see how each is kind of referenced in the spread. There are some advanced techniques about how to scry psychically into these titles and these words, or using the numerology. At the moment, that's probably going to be ending up on Patreon before it's going to end up here. So if you're interested in those kind of advanced style of reading, then jump over to my Patreon. However, here we've got Le Basteleur. So, as I said in previous videos, my French pronunciation could definitely do with work. I can barely remember the French that I did in school. So, Le Basteleur means the juggler, and by talking about the juggler, even though we've got a magician here, we're talking about a stage, a street performer, or a stage performer. So we have someone that is a typical personality in the kind of Middle Ages or medieval period, and that's when we spoke in a previous video about the first 7 cards and the sets of 7, the septenaries. The first set of 7 tend to be based around characters or mundane people that you would see in everyday life. So this is a kind of an everyday life and everyday matters and concerns kind of level, the first 7. So the Basteleur is a juggler. Jugglers obviously have to keep balance of things flying up in the air. They're also trying to catch things. So it could be about balance. It could be about not dropping things in front of other people. It could be, those kind of things. When we get over to the Rider-Waite, we see a change. They've changed it to the magician, being a ceremonial magic kind of era. They've changed this to being much more ceremonial magic and much more up to date. This change, I think, originally was in the Oswald Worth deck, so a lot older than not an awful lot older than the Golden Dawn, but slightly older than the Golden Dawn. So here we've got a reimagining of this card as the magician, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But the magician is a lot more aligned to this divinity and this sense of self and how one presents oneself to other people. Good. So let us talk about the imagery of this card. So the imagery of this card, we have a man, presumably a man, standing in front of a table. And he has one hand up in the air and one hand down by his waist. He is looking this side of the card over to here, and he has numerous articles, objects on the table in front of him. Okay, he's standing on some bare earth, and the earth is not straight, it's not completely flat, and it's got bumps and it's got plants all over. So he's standing in some sort of rural location. So where shall we start with this card? What jumps out first? Well, let's talk about this hat. Actually, we'll refer to that a bit later, just because it's going to be easier if I doodle over the card, and I'll show you in a second. So one thing that's noted about this table is that it has a representation of each of the minor arcana suits on this desk, well, and in his hands. So here we've got a couple of cups from the suit of cups. We have this image that looks more like a ball, but we've got these tiny things that look like coins. We've got knives or swords, and then here we've got a baton or a staff or a wand. Yeah, so this is talking about the tools that are available to the magician, or to the juggler, or however you name this card. So he has his tools, or his tools at his disposal in front of him. So there's an aspect of skill here. There's an aspect of using his tools for his daily job. His daily job is a street performer. He is using these to make tricks or show off certain slight hand skills, those kind of things. So there's definitely this element of skill here. He's looking over here. Now sometimes when the cards look to their right, our left, this is an indication that it's talking about the past. It's talking about what has happened before, because we read from left to right. So there's an aspect of that. However, I try to note that he is not looking at what he's doing. So he's here with a baton in the air. He's looking over here and he's doing something down here with a coin. It almost looks like he's pocketing this coin. This is misdirection. Yeah, where the magician looks is usually where the audience looks. If I look relatively surprised and over here, generally speaking, the people that I'm performing to will look over here to see what I'm looking at, to see what I'm reacting to. And it's very obvious in this card that his looking over here whilst doing something up here is trying to distract from his hand here. Yeah, so this is a symbol of misdirection. We can see this as looking at the past. We can see this as referring to his skills that he's previously learned, or what he's learned previously, and putting it into action in the present day, kind of a present day situation, but in order to make some money. But he's also reflecting people's attention from what he's doing. Okay, so what else is he doing? Well, he's got one hand up and one hand down. This is sometimes about balance. This is sometimes about juggling, but sometimes reaching up is talking about the heavens or the divine, and reaching down is about the mundane world. So we'll see this more in the Rider-Waite, because it really tries to focus on this. The other thing we see is this very solid structure, this table. This table can represent material things or material reality. So in some ways, we are looking at someone that is manipulating material reality. And one thing that was pointed out to me when I started studying the tarot is this leg. This leg is rather eye-drawing because of his very well developed calf muscles, of which I'm pretty jealous. But what it was pointed out was the fact that the table only has 3 legs. The 4th leg could be seen as being made up by his leg. So the idea of this solid structure is an illusion that he completes. That's a little bit complex and a little bit woo-woo. But this idea that the solid world, the material world, is finished by him. This creation of the solid world, and him having a part of that creation. Okay. So I'm going to jump across to the tablet here. I've just set up this card here in order to illustrate a couple of the symbols that I thought would be easier to draw out than not. So this hat, you'll see this symbol that I'm drawing in his hat. Yep. Ooh, lovely. So this figure of 8, this lemniscate, this lemniscate is the symbol of eternity. And we don't just see that here in this card, we also see it here. If we follow his arm up and around and then join to the other arm and go up and around, and then we see where he's pointing this wand down to the coin in his right hand. So we've got these two lemniscates or infinity symbols. So an infinity symbol traditionally shows possibilities, the infinite realm of possibilities, but it also links to the spiritual realm. So we have this figure of 8 that means the spiritual realm, and we have this physicality table where his leg kind of creates it. So he is bringing the spiritual to the material, but in the way that he likes, in this illusory way. You know, he doesn't have to make it a reality, he can make the reality anything that he likes. The other thing, now let me just see whether I can just zoom in here. The other thing that you could see, the other way of seeing the infinite symbol is one of origin or one of beginning, where those possibilities and those endless possibilities come from. And we have, like I was talking about, this beautiful calf muscle here. If we follow this around, push a little bit more, go across here, and there's the other calf, and then complete it here. This shape, this negative shape, is sometimes seen as a woman's pelvis. Talking about the origin of things, talking about where reality comes from. You'll see this, let me just go back to here. You'll see this better on this card here, because they've really emphasized it. And this strange plant that loads of people have been talking about what this could possibly be, whether it's a type of cactus or makes it very, very kind of blatant symbolism about a woman's pelvis or the womb. So we've got this imagery here that's kind of linked to this eternity, so the realm of possibilities becoming manifest in solid world, this material domain that he finishes and he creates, and then the origin of things, the womb, the origin of humanity. Yeah, so that's on there. Right, is there anything else we want to talk about in here? So we've kind of briefly talked about this creating reality as one sees, and that can be seen as kind of manipulative. Yes, it takes skill, and yes, the magician is a street performer that is showing skill, but we're also seeing one that it can be manipulative. So the dark aspect of this side is like the salesman, I suppose. If you imagine someone on the street trying to sell car insurance or whatever, the PPI money, you know, the typical thing that's hard sell, you'll see someone that is very good at being able to manipulate their buyer into buying what they're selling. They might not be set out to have bought that, but they will be buying it by the end of their sales patter. So this is a very good aspect of the magician that is in its negative connotation. This idea of manipulation. So we can see that when we look back at this distracting. We are distracting you from what's really happening, what's really going on, so we can pocket coins or do whatever we need to do to kind of get that money. So this could be seen as a salesman, a very good salesman, or a very manipulative salesman, however that kind of goes. So in some ways, this card is about skill, it's about the ability to be able to do things. But on another scale, this is about manipulating the people that are around them in order to kind of get what they want. This links this card a little bit to modern day politicians, being able to manipulate the masses into believing what they're presenting is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, whilst things are going on behind the card that the viewer might not be aware of. So yes, it could be a salesman, yes it could be a politician, it could be a very good and well-meaning politician, but it could also be a manipulative politician or a manipulative salesperson that is just trying to kind of get their own way. So those are some of the negative aspects from this misdirection. This figure of 8 always makes me think of movement. There's an awful lot of movement in the Marseille decks, specifically this one hand up and the other hand down, but in this very soft, gentle way, makes me feel like there's a lot of movement. It's not a solid stance, it's someone being captured as they're moving. So that makes me think of the Juggler. When they kind of named it the Juggler, it makes me think of throwing balls up in the air and catching them, and that movement, that sense of movement that is very prevalent in the Marseille style. So yes, it's an active card. It's something that purposely manipulates the things in front of them and is purposely moving and purposely going for something. Let's take a look at the Rider-Waite-Smith card. So this card is a little bit different, but similar in an awful lot of ways. So we've got this eye, which we talked about before. We've got the magician, full stop, on the bottom, and we've now got a picture of the magician. We don't have a street performer, we have a ceremonial magician in our front of us. We still have the 4 elements, the 4 suits of the tarot on the table, and we still have one hand up in the air and one hand down, though we've got the reverse. Here we had the juggler's left hand up and the right hand down. We've got the right hand up and the left hand down. I personally think that makes a difference. But it's probably a little bit too waffly and a little bit too nitty gritty to get into it. However, let's go back to this. This is a very solid stance. So where we've come from a card that had a lot of movement, we're now seeing something that's very purposely posed. That's very purposely, I will pose and you will take a photo of it. So we've got someone that's looking directly at the viewer, or the reader in this case, by the magician. We've got a headband, but they're staring straight at the magician whilst they're posing. This is a very as above, so below hand movement. Same here, but this one is about bringing the divine down to earth. This is about seeing the unlimited potentials above down to earth, which is a very hermetic principle. This as above, so below. What is happening in the heavens, I can manipulate to happen on earth, as my skill as a magician. It's a very commanding stance. This is someone that is very sure of their abilities and very sure of their presence. Here the skill was a lot more fluid. Yes, they had the same skill. Yes, they were pocketing coins without people realizing it, but it's not very affronted. It's very subtle and a very, very slow movement. We still have the as above, so below, but it's this figure of 8, this movement. This card doesn't show a sense of movement. It's very, very strong. That's one of the very strong differences between this style of tarot and this Rider-Waite-Smith. This is very fixed, powerful, stronger. This is someone that is saying that they are strong, that they are powerful. If we saw these as magicians, we'd be seeing this someone as very self-confident about their skill as a magician. But as a 1, as the first card in the deck, we're not sure that they are very experienced at the moment, but they are certainly pretending to be. Whereas here is someone that's definitely enjoying the moment and in the moment, that they're very present in the moment. They're not so much kind of wanting to make the viewer think that they're skilled, they're just doing their job. So another thing about this card is that you'll see the figure of 8 above them. So instead of having it subtly in the hat, we've got it very obviously here. And we're talking about the unlimited potential that can be put into action, that can be created. It's the sense of an idea. An idea can be something revolutionary, you know, like an iPad, or when it first came out, or the Mac computer. Or it could be something that just you dismiss and it disappears into nothingness. This infinite realm of possibilities and creating it on Earth. And in some ways, that's what this garden of lilies and roses. Yes, this is a hint towards the Song of Songs, and yes, the lilies mean something and the roses mean something in Hermetic tradition. But it's also talking about the garden of desires, the making things manifest based on the desires of the person. We see a lot of red and white in this card, and yes, it's linked into that kind of Golden Dawn thing of these two energies, this yin and yang in magic. You see this kind of in Franz Barden's writings as well, this kind of active principle and passive principle, and the magician is one that marries the two together. They marry the earth with the heavens. So that is the Rider-Waite-Smith at a glance. Let us talk about the standard definitions in the various little white little booklets. So I grabbed one of the white little booklets from the Thoth just because it was on hand, and it talks about skill, wisdom, adroitness or adroitness, elasticity, craft, cunning, deceit, theft, sometimes occult wisdom or power, messages, business transactions, ill-dignified, learning or intelligence interfering with the matter in hand. Let's try and see each of those in the cards, although we have mentioned a few of those. So we have skill. Yes, we've talked about skill here. We talked about this is the skills of his trade or the tools of his trade, and he's showing skill in being able to perform. We're showing skill in it being able to distract the person over here. Wisdom. I'd argue with this, but yes, there is a certain sense of wisdom. Wisdom is things that I've learned through experience. It's knowledge from experience. It's not theoretical knowledge. It's not just things that you've read about. And here, as we said earlier, that the card is looking over to past experiences that they're drawing on. So the wisdom that the magician has is from the past, from past experience, from hard-won lessons. You know, being on the street as a street performer, I imagine a lot of them will talk about the hardships that they went through and the times that they didn't want to do it, but they just did it anyway. And that's the kind of the wisdom of the Basteleur or the magician, is this hard-won knowledge based on experience. I would argue with it because it's so early in the deck, it doesn't really constitute a true wisdom. It's not someone that is extremely worldly. It's someone that has started up. It's someone that is beginning in their world by kind of performing on the street and trying to get some extra money. It's someone that is maybe still a student that has decided to start playing guitar on the streets for money. It's not the wisdom of a 70-year-old. It's not the wisdom of an 80-year-old. It's very much a wisdom of a young man. So, elasticity. I think that this is best explained on the Marseille because of this movement, because of this flux. I don't see this card very much in elasticity. If there was an issue at hand, if there was a problem that this card came up on, if I was doing a tarot, let's start that again. If I was doing a tarot card spread and someone had asked me how should they solve the problem, and this card came up, I wouldn't be reading it in the way of show a little bit of elasticity, change your views to reflect the matter. What I'd say is probably put a bit of a brave face on, don't give them a good show and let them see what you want them to see. It's very fixed, it's the I, the ego, it's also pounding through is that active principle. So it's not so much elasticity in either card, but there you go. Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we'll disagree. Craft, yes, this is about creating, this is about honing one's craft as a street performer, as a magician. Cunning, we talked about this cunning deceit. This could be a magician, it could be a politician, it could be a salesman. They are creating the reality that they want you to see. If this came up in reference to another person, what should I know about my boss or at work, or what should I know about the man that I'm dating? And the Basteleur came up, I'd be like, in terms of relationships, he's a bit of a playboy. He's putting on a show, and you're not really seeing his true authentic self, or there is the possibility that he is playing you, or there is a possibility that he is doing his best based on his limited amount of experience. It's not someone that is hugely nurturing. We'd much more see something like the Emperor or something around there. So there's a sense of limitedness about it. In terms of bosses, it would be someone that is the salesman. It's someone that you kind of want as a boss. It's someone that's going to show you the tools of the trade. It's someone that's going to show you their pattern, the things that work for them historically, especially if you're in sales, especially if you're in something like IT and talking about functionality of a new app. That ability, that patter, that being able to put on a show is sometimes good in the business, and it's sometimes good for a boss. But you might not know what they're thinking. They might divorce their emotions from the job. You might not see the true person behind that boss, but they're going to be very good at what they do. So that's in two different ways. The other one is this sometimes occult wisdom or power. I like the sometimes because, like I said, this is not someone has a lot of magical potential yet. There's an awful lot of potential there, but it's not realised yet. They're still very early on. This is the first trump. If they were going to be a master magician, they'd be right at the other end. This is someone that is still trying to weigh it up. And there's an awful lot of duality in this card. So I mentioned this in my previous video about this duality that's early in the cards that peters out and becomes unified by the end. That's one of the stories that you can do as you're going through the tarot, this sense of unification, this sense of pulling the parts together and making a whole. And here we have it in the arm up, arm down, arm up, arm down, as above, so below. And even in the four elements to some extent, this active, passive principles in the elements. And we've got it here in the red and white very beautifully. So there's a lot of duality here. It's still early days. This is not a unified person yet. This is not a person that is one and whole. It's not someone that has worked strongly and being the best magician or the best witch, or spiritual Christian or whatever path. It's still really early on that path. What else does it say here? Messages and business transactions. Yes, so one aspect of this card that is not prevalent from the imagery, but it is part of the occult teachings. These cards, this card is the planet Mercury. So if we're looking at astrological correlations, astrological connotations of the card, this is the planet Mercury. There are 7 planets in traditional astrology, so 7 of the 22 majors are planets, then the 12 zodiac signs, and then there's several that are, if you read the French authors, that are about the worlds, the 3 worlds, but we'll get to that when we get to them. So this would be Mercury. Mercury is transactions, it's business transactions, it's messages, it's emails, it's things that are fast, it's things especially that are electric, that move fast. So it is current trends, it is Instagram, it is Facebook, it is instant messenger. Traditionally it would be messages and letters and maybe even carrier pigeons. It's things that move fast and are about communication. It can also be about finances and mathematics and learning, but those meanings that are based on businesses and messages come from its planetary meaning. Cool. So let's have a quick look also at the divinatory meanings from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Here we're talking about skill, diplomacy, and so the skill we talked about, the diplomacy, we're referencing that the magician or the Basteleur as a politician. Yeah. Sickness, pain, loss, disaster, self-confidence. So sickness, pain, loss, disaster. This is where the Rider-Waite-Smith has weird meanings, and I've pointed this out in the previous video. This is a good point. This can also represent the querent. There is a style of reading, especially very traditional, where you would have the significator card. This is a card that signifies the person that you're giving a reading to, or yourself if you're giving yourself a reading. So in old style reading, especially like some of the early French stuff, you would pull this card out if you were reading for a male, and you would pull out the High Priestess, the next card here, if you were reading for a female. That is rarely done now. I've not seen a lot of people that read with significator cards, but it's basically just as a focus of the reading, and you put them in the center and then you read around it. So you could use it as a significator card for a man. Who's going to do that? No one. We'll just leave it in the deck. So that is basically the upshot of this card. So let us recap. The number is 1. It is unified. It is about the unity or the infinite potentials that are coming, and it's about the beginnings of things. It could also be seen as the I, the personality, or the way that someone is putting their personality across in a room, and their sense of self-confidence. As the title, we are looking at either a street performer or a magician. The magician element is someone that is still young and practicing and learning their craft as a magician. As a Basteleur or the Juggler, it is someone that is doing the hard graft and basing it on some of the previous experience that they've had, but is still learning their trade. It is one of the cards for the first 7, so it is about everyday matters and everyday concerns. And then if we look at the image, we are seeing symbols of the infinity sign, which is about that connection to infinite potential in the world of ideas, and also making them manifest, bringing them down to the material, but in a way that the magician wants, in a way that the magician wants people to see, because they're putting on an illusion, they're putting on a show. They are allowing you to see what they want you to see. So, as when we talked about the image, we were pointing out this sense of misdirection as they're doing stuff, but also about this referring to the past experiences, the things that have been learned. We were also talking about the 4 suits that are on the table, i.e. they have all the tools at hand for their craft and their skill. We were also talking about the table being this solid material world, and the very sexy big calves showing this negative image of the female womb, or the source of life, or the beginnings of things. We have also spoken about this arm up and this arm down and this duality principle, but also talked about how this can be misdirection, how this can be pocketing things, as well as that hidden symbol of figure 8. So congratulations, you've lasted through tarot number 1. Next on the reel is tarot card number 2, or the High Priestess, also known as La Papesse, which is one of my favourite cards. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel and carry on watching for the next card in the sequence. And if you need any clarification on something that I've gone through in this video, because I did go through a very fast 20-30 minutes for one tarot card, please put a comment below. I will try and reply to them. I do tend to talk fast, and feel free just to tell me off for talking too fast, but feel free to kind of comment below. In the meantime, grab your tarot deck, look at that card, see where it goes in the sequence, and play around with different interpretations depending on the circumstance. What would you say if it came up in a spread about love? What would you say if it came up in a spread about work or business? And also, if you're more into the meditating side, why don't you meditate with a card and see what it talks to you about? Imagine meeting that street magician on the road and seeing how it replies to you. I'm going to write down everything plus a little bit extra of what I've kind of covered in this video as a little bit of a PDF handout for my Patreon supporters. If you jump over there, you should be able to kind of get that relatively soonish. So that will kind of go over the symbols that I drew on the card and that image, as well as the general definitions and the general ideas that I talked around about the misdirection and looking through to the past. So if that interests you, please jump straight over there to kind of get those. Anyway, happy taroting, and I shall speak to you soon.